Hello everybody, welcome to the Python course. In the previous class, we have covered module 9, that is file handling and modules. In this part, we will cover module 10, that is exceptional handling and regular expressions. This module is also being divided into two parts. In the first part, we will cover the exception handling part. We will see topics such as what are exceptions, how we can detect exceptions and catch them. We will see user defined exceptions also in this part, and the next part we will look upon our regular expressions. So let's start. So I have already opened up my Anaconda navigator and will launch a new notebook by the name of this module. Okay, so I'll go to documents, GitHub projects, then Python trainings in Trunic, and I will create a new Python 3 notebook named module 10, that is exceptional handling. Okay, okay. So in this lecture we will see what are exceptions, how exceptions are handled using try except, try except as else, and try except and finally block. So these are some of the blocks we will study and we will analyze. So what is the difference between these three blocks? So uh, next we will look upon the common Python exceptions and the custom exceptions, how we can create our user defined exception or custom exception. Okay. So what is an exception? So exception is an error that happens during the execution of a program, right? So if the exception is not caught, the program is terminated. For example, you are trying to, you have written some code, and in this code you are handling some piece of information or some values, and if the data type of the values is not correct, or the computation or any arithmetic operation is not correct, it will raise an exception. If it will raise an exception, the program will terminate, and the statements which are written after that statement will not get executed. So this means you you haven't done your desired operation, right? You have worked upon your similar program, but your program does not gets executed because it has encountered an exception. So exception needs to be handled, right? And it needs to be caught and well treated, right? So in Python, exceptions are triggered automatically on errors, right? And they can be triggered and intercepted by your code. So this means we need to write, if we look upon our programming, and if we doubt that this part of or this piece of code can can result in occurring an exception, so we can handle that code piece of code, right? So that we gonna look upon. So in a nutshell, what I can say that what is an exception is an error that happens during the execution of a program, first of all, and if it is not caught, your program is terminated, and if you wanted to do some operation, that operation will not happen because your exception has been occurred. So it is better, and better programming, better way of doing the programs is to catch that exception, to write a user defined code such that you need to catch that and your programs gets running, right? So there are two types of exceptions, right? And we have some keywords to deal with the exceptions. So let us understand. So exception handling has two types, right? One is raising or throwing, and another one is catching. First we raise exception or throw exception and then we catch that exception, right? If the Python interpreter or a Python compiler raises the exception, and we need to catch that exception and give a user defined value, or we wanted to do some operation. If the so and so exception has occurred, follow this operation, else do that operation, right? So Python provides three keywords to deal with exceptions. First is your raise, then is your try, then is your accept. So these all are written in your block statements, right? Okay. So let us try to first raise exception by the Python program, right? So we all know that you cannot divide your number by 0, right? So this is illogical. So mathematically we cannot do it. So divide by number raises a integer division or modulo by 0 exception or 0 division error, right? In this part you can see that we have created a function called divide, and we are taking number as an argument, right? And we are printing 100 divided by number. So if the number is 0, right, in this case, so it will throw an exception and it will result in termination of your program, right? For example, there is a piece of code, long piece of 100 lines of code written, and you are written your divide program, divide function in that, and you are calling that function, and after that there are a couple of steps that you need to execute, right? So here in this divide program itself you raised exception, so your program gets terminated there only, and after that whatever statements are written, then they will not be get executed, right? So in order to get your program running and working, so you need to catch this exception. So this exception has occurred and you need to catch that exception, right? So let us try practically how we can create exception and then we could catch that exception, right? Okay, so suppose, so I create a divide, right, and I take a number, right? So I'm saying return 100 divided by number, right? And in this part I am calling a divide, and then I'm calling a this is my exceptional handling part, right? So these are the two statements. So what this will do, suppose I will first write a normal program, right? So this is my normal program, so it will not return anything, it will not return me an error, right? So this will gets executed. So what I am trying to do is, first I am calling the divide method and passing the argument as 100. So 100 divided by 100 it will return 1, right? So this gets printed, right? And after that I'm printing this is exception handling part, right? Okay, so let us try to run this. So this is exception handling part. If I put here a print statement, so it will return me 1, right? Okay, so this is perfectly fine. We have written some kind of code, and this two statements gets executed, right? So now instead of writing divide 100, so I am writing 0 here. So we don't know, we are getting this input from some value which is doing some arithmetic operations and calculations, and we don't know whether this what is the actual value of this operation or actual value of this variable, right? So this value we are getting from some variable, and it is getting created by some computation, and we are getting suppose 0 as this value, and we are passing in divide function, right? And we are trying to run it. So when I try to run it, so it gives us division by 0 error, the 0 division error, and my next statement does not get executed, right? The program halts at this place only, and it will give you an error. So there is a better way of programming to handle these kinds of errors by using your exception handling part, right? Okay. So this part we have understood how we can raise an exception. This exception has been generated by your Python, right? and the name of the exception is zero division error. So this says this is your exception name, that is zero division error, and you need to catch this exception. If this exception comes, you need to perform some other operations, right? So this we need to do it. Okay. Okay. So how we can handle that exception? In order to handle exception, we can wrap our code in the try and except block, right? So what we are trying to do is we are trying to put a check on this statement by putting a try block, and whatever exception will occur, suppose it will occur zero division error, then you need to print something or you need to perform some other operation, right? So that way we can handle this operation by using a try and except block. In the try, whatever piece of code we find that, or uh, we think that this will give or raise an exception, that piece of code we put in a try block, and in the except block we write an exception that this kind of exception is handled. If you don't try to write anything, it will try to catch all the exceptions. So this is specific one, right? If you don't remember the name of the exception and you don't know whether this kind of exception would be raised or not, so you simply write accept and don't write the name of the exception. That way also it works, right? So let us try to correct our program and write in a better method, right? So what I will do is I will put it in a try block, right? And I will say x is equal to this, then it is a accept, right? Number is divisible by 0, right? And here I am saying return okay, right? So here I could say return 0, okay. So this says number is divisible by 0, right? So this it has gone into this except block because it was a divide 0, and it has returned the value as 0 because we have specified 0, right? Instead of we need to get a return value from a function, right? Either you can give it or you can specify anything, right? So you can also specify a print statement or you can specify a return statement also, whatever way you like, right? So here I am not putting any exception because it will catch all the exceptions. If I wanted to catch a specific exception, then I need to put here zero division error, right? Then now you can see your program has not got terminated, so it is being handled, and now the second print statement also got executed, right? And this works both ways. So if you wanted to do 10, so 10 also it works fine. It will return the 100 divided by 10 is 10.0, 10.0, right? This is exception handling part. So second statement also get executed. So this is how your exception handling works by using your try and accept block, right? Okay. So the other piece we have, or other block of code we have, try, accept, and else. We have seen that we have seen try, we need to do something, or whatever code we need to we think that this will raise an exception, so we'll put it in the accept block, that we have handled the exception in the accept block, right? And the else, we have also else part, it will get executed only when there is no exception, right? So we could also say try, do something, right? So calculate the value of x, right? Accept it, if it got exception, then handle that exception in this part. Else, execute it only when there is no exception. Do that part, right? So code in the else block is only executed if there is no exception, right? So here, instead of writing here return x, I could simply write here else, and I could say return x. So this works also fine. Or if I wanted to write something else also, print, let's say my code works, right? So here we have put the logic, right? Whatever we feel like, whatever the statements we wanted to write, or we think that this will raise an error, so that we put in a try block. And if some kind of exception will come, we put in this block. And if this code works, you directly go to the else part, right? So this is how your try, except, and else block will work, right? So in this part, so it says my code works, and it has raised given the value of x, that is 10, and then the other part also worked. So this is how your try, except, and else block will work in the case of your exception handling, right? Okay, so in this part we have put the computation part in your try block, and except if it raises some error, so it will catch this exception here. Else, this part work, it will directly go into this part, and it will say result is that 10, that is 100 divided by 10 is 10, right? So this is how your try, except, else block will work. Another kind of block we have is try, except, and finally. This is very important, right? Finally block is always executed no matter what, right? The basic syntax is similar to what we have studied earlier. In the try block, we need to write that code in which we think that this might occur an exception. Except if the exception occurs, we need to handle that exception, right? And finally, it is always executed no matter what. Whether you get exception, whether you don't get exception, this is always will be executed, right? So let us try to do that part. For example, I'll copy this part again, so that, okay, in the else part I do a finally block, right? And instead of writing return, I would say return number, right? Okay, now what is happening? So first, there are two cases. First, either you divide that number or pass the argument as the correct one, that is 110, right? And the second is your 0, right? In these two cases, your print my code works will always be executed no matter what. First, it will go to this block, right? And if the exception has been raised, so it will go to this part, and it will return 0, right? Right? And after that, it will go to this block also, right? So I'll just comment this part, and then you can see. First, we will see what will happen if we write 10 in my divide function, passing in the argument 10, right? So let us try to, okay, see. So first, what it does is it says my code works. So this piece of code has always been executed no matter what, right? And then it has returned nothing because we have commented our return statement. And then after that, this part got executed, right? Got it? And if I try to pass 0, let us see what will happen. Now it says number is divisible by 0. Then it has gone to this part, my code works, and then it has returned 0 because it is returning 0, right? And then this piece of code works. This means we can get to a conclusion that either we get exception or we don't get exception. Whatever we write in this part of code, this will already be get executed, right? So this part we wanted to do the operation irrespective to whether it will raise exception or not. In some cases, right, in the practical implementation, you wanted to get the amount transferred to a particular bank account, right? Or you can say that you wanted to give the message to a user, no matter what, right? So this kind of some kind of operation you wanted to just do it irrespective to any kind of exception, or right. So this is some kind of we wanted to put a high priority code here, right? So this is why finally block is being used. Okay, so now we have a this is explained in this slide also, right? So we have a try block in which we have the except. Here we are catching that exception, and then we have the finally. So here we are printing or doing some operations here. So this piece of code will always be get executed, right? Now, now there are some common Python exceptions. So we have the IO error. The file is not opened or it cannot be opened, so it raises an IO error, right? Then we have the import error. If the Python cannot find the particular module we are trying to import it, so that it will raise an import error, right? Then the next is value error. It is raised when a built-in operation or a function receives an argument that has the right type but an inappropriate value, right? You are trying to define an integer, but you are passing a string value, right? So that piece of information will raises your value error. And key error is raised when mapping dictionary is not found in the sets of dictionary. You are trying to retrieve a particular key which is not present in your dictionary, that will raise a key error. Indentation error due to incorrect indentation. And syntax, it is raised when the parser encounters a syntax, right? So these are the common exceptions which uh, we need to understand, right? And for handling a particular type of exception, you need to put a value or a name in the except in after the except keyword, right? So that's way we could use these common Python exceptions, right? Then we look upon the custom exceptions, right? So the custom exceptions could be inherited from the exception class, right? So you could create your own class and write my exception, and then in the exception in this class you could write your own implementation, right? And this can be written like by the try and the except, and here you could raise my exception. Whatever you write, it will go to this part, this class, and then whatever implementation you want, you can override the existing implementation. This is basically you are passing you are calling the base class, that is exceptional class, and here you can write some your own methods or your own functions. This is how your user defined functions will work, right? Okay, okay, so this module 10 has been completed, and it's being exception handling part has been completed. Okay, so in the next part we will look upon the regular expressions. Hope you enjoyed the video, so stay tuned for the next one. So thank you very much, guys.